Hello, hello, everybody. It is AMA Day, Thursday. As you all know, I'm Leanne Langer. I am OpenComp's Head of Customer Experience. And today I am here with Ashley Brunstein, OpenComp's Senior Director of All Things People. Hey, Ashley.
Hi, Leanne. Excited to be here.
We're happy to have you. Today we have a super important topic to chat about. Our topic is building a people-first culture. And before we get started, Ashley, would you mind introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about your background?
Absolutely. So I've been at OpenComp now for about 2.5 months. And prior to joining OpenComp, I was at a company called Day2IQ, formerly known as Mesosphere, for about 7 years. And prior to that, I had a brief stint over at Redfin. Had lots of different roles from, recruiting to HR product manager. And for those who've never heard of an HR product manager, it really stems from the philosophy that HR ships product. And the product that HR ships are really everything that touches an employee lifecycle, right? So your onboarding experience is a product of HR. Your performance review is a product of HR. Even conversations that you have with your manager can be a product of HR, right? If your manager doesn't have the proper leadership skills. And I've had some other roles like HR business partners, et cetera. And then, more recently in the past couple of years, I have been a people leader running both HR and recruiting at People First companies.
Thank you. I have never heard of an HR product manager before, so that's new for me.
I love the concept. I love the philosophy of it. And it's something that I've carried into my roles as a leader.
Yeah. I mean, I love thinking about employees as our internal customer. And I also had a very good friend and mentor who started writing a series on LinkedIn about how every member of the executive team is actually reflected within HR as well. So HR as the CEO, HR as the CFO, HR as the CMO, but again, all relating to the employee as the internal customer. So I love that. HR product manager.
Right.
Awesome. Well, that was a very interesting start. Thank you for that. So as we get into our topic today, most companies are talking about the importance of their people, but we know very well that talking the talk is not the same as actually believing it, actually walking the walk, actually implementing, the importance of the people from a day-to-day perspective. So what does having a people-first culture mean to you?
So a people first culture, it's one of the reasons I joined OpenComp. After I spoke to a few executives during my interview process, it became very apparent, and they actually used the words, we want a people first culture. And for the HR folks who decide to listen to this or dialed in right now, I'm sure those are things that pull at your heartstrings, right? So for me, a people first culture is really a culture that is developed when the company realizes that and treats, I should say too, that the people are the greatest asset, right? And to make sure that they aren't just saying they're a people first culture, but that they're actually actioning on it and doing this by listening to their team in a proactive way, not waiting for team members to come bring feedback, and making sure that they are realizing that the feedback and welcoming that feedback, right, is so important to the employee's journey and shaping the culture of the organization, and making sure that those ideas and the feedback received are actioned on to create programs that benefit everyone, right? And a people first culture, doesn't necessarily mean that you recognize that that people are what make a company great, but it also reinforces that people are what make a company great in its daily operations, communication strategy, et cetera.
Yeah, definitely. So to summarize that, a people first culture will place this idea of an everyday value on its team members. And you do that, like you said, by seeking input, by asking employees for their ideas, and for building this sort of idea of a partnership in the way in which you as a company or teams within your company, the way in which you solve challenges, but also celebrate the wins, right? So it's this all for one for all sort of mentality. I think it can also be helpful if we talk a little bit about what a people-first culture is not.
Absolutely. And in a people first culture, it's very important to realize that does not mean that you do everything that comes across, your quote desk. It doesn't mean that you action on every piece of feedback, but it also, what it means is, that you listen to that feedback. And when there are things that you can't action on, that you really explain the why you can't do that. So right, aligning to the company goals, the business goals, that people understand when someone has a great idea, you're not actioning. And then there's other things. So if we think about an idea that you can't action on, offsites are a really great example of that, because in post-COVID world, so many of us are remote and we're not getting that opportunity to meet in person. So it's often something that I hear a lot from employees about is, I want to go see my team in person. And I think it's crucial, right? It's good to build relationships, and to share that human connection, but they're expensive. Especially when you're fully distributed. Open Comp is in 12 different states right now. So to fly folks from 12 different states, maybe some rural areas, right, to one location can be a big cost sink for the business. And so it's important that, there's a business justification when you hear some of these ideas, and you're bringing and getting the buy-in from the team as well as to why you can't implement some of those things.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you here. I mean, with any people team, also with the executive leadership team, and even with direct people managers, ultimately it's our job to make sure that there is this solid alignment between the company's strategic objectives, as well as the people needs, and the people that we actually rely on to help us meet these objectives. So, talking about feedback, it's really important to solicit it, but you hit the nail on the head, where the communication loop, it needs to remain intact, so the employees know that their feedback is heard, but they also understand where it falls in line with these strategic priorities. So let's talk a bit about how companies are seeking feedback from their team members. How do you actually begin building an employee feedback loop?
So employee feedback loop just starts by talking to your people. So I've been on board at OpenComp now, 2.5 months, and I am making sure that I have a touch point and a check-in with every single employee. And I'm really excited to say that as a company of 50, I will have finished those check-ins by the end of this week. But really showing kind of this open door policy that we want to hear from you. We want to hear about your journey so far, that we are establishing that feedback culture, right, at the very beginning. So post my check-ins this week, I plan on having a new hire check-in with everyone when they come on board. I'm not going to do that, obviously I'll have orientation their first day, but I will make sure too that as they start to get acclimated with OpenComp culture, that I am establishing that feedback loop and seeking feedback on their experience of why OpenComp, role alignment, and kind of digging in over there. So really one-on-ones and check-ins are your best tool. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be me. I'm hiring a people ops generalist who will start on Monday, and making sure that she also has a piece of this, right? So that could be from your generalist, it can be from your HR business partners or whoever those are. But what I like about these check-ins coming from someone in HR is that you're establishing this trust and relationship, and this idea that HR isn't here for your first day and here on your last day, that you're really there for them on the journey at OpenComp or at whatever your company is, right? So you're establishing this feedback loop quickly and showing that there's a kind of trusted safety between the two of you, that they can come to you. And this will open the door for future things when they're having a hard time at work, when they've got a team member that they're really butting heads with and they just want to be coached, right? Or they're seeing something that makes them feel uncomfortable and they just want to go talk, right? They've already had that door opened with you and know that they can come find you. Now, the other thing is, I don't scale, right? So for me, a company of 50, right, how do I then maintain those check-ins over time? And so when you get to a company of 150 or 300, right, you might not be able to do check-ins the way that I can at 50. So there's other ways of doing that. Feedback, feedback in the form of surveys. So whether it's an engagement survey or it's an onboarding survey, right? So if I decide that I can't reasonably meet anymore with new hires and find out how their experience has been, I can absolutely send new hire onboarding surveys after 60 or 90 days, right? Same with exit interviews. I think an exit interview is always better when there's a human touch to it, but coupled with a exit survey, it's awesome. Right. So utilizing surveys when you can, I think is really, really great way to collect feedback as well.
Yeah, the trust that you build with employees is really important. When they know that they're able to come and have an honest, transparent, real and authentic conversation with you, when you give them that experience the first time around, then they're more comfortable coming and doing it again. And then the trust just continues to build over time that this is a safe place to be me and to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and I'm going to get support no matter what, because again, we're here to support each other, and we're in this journey together. Like you said, it's not about a one time, but it is about the evolution of the company, of the relationship, and of the team member. Yeah. So I love that. I also think an important takeaway is that the goal is not just to get employees to talk. Sometimes that's the first hurdle in the first battle is like, please just talk to me. And so, getting that conversation started is definitely a win in itself. But it goes farther than that. We need to make sure that we are asking the right questions of our employees, and then ensuring that we interpret the responses to these questions and then do something valuable with the information that is shared.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. The right questions do matter. And again, it's about how do you respond to some of those questions. So, for example, let's just talk about new hire check-ins, right? So things that are really important to me when someone is joining is, one, I want to understand their previous experience, right? Have they ever worked at a startup before, so that it's informing some of their what they might share later, right? Are they someone who's only been at a big company, and some of the things they're experiencing here, like lack of process or building the process as they join, right? It will help me understand how they answer some of those things. But it's also important that you are figuring out what matters most to them. So one of the great things that I ask in my check-ins is actually, if I had a magic wand and I could grant you one wish, work-related, what is that magic wand wish? And the reason I ask this question, and I get a lot of kind of, I haven't thought about that. That's a hard question to answer. And the reason I'm asking that question is very intentional, because it's really getting to what matters most to that employee. What is the biggest thing that they need solved today, and really understanding their priorities, right? And so for employees also to talk openly and honestly, they need to feel that they're in a safe space and in a safe relationship, that they're not going to be judged for the feedback that they share, right? And so in some of those ways too, a third party survey might be the best option. If you'd have employees who maybe have come from a big company, I find this actually very common, where if they're coming from a larger corporation, they've never spoken to HR in their life. And so the idea of being open and honest with you may be a very scary thing to them, and you might not get results. But if you do a survey, maybe that's anonymous, you might actually get more honest feedback. And it really, there's no one size fits all here, but there's just, some options and some things to be aware of as you figure out what your feedback strategy is going to be.
And so in regards to the feedback, we're talking about this idea of building trust. So what can you do to build trust in regards to the feedback experience?
Well, what's interesting is the very first time that you build trust with the employee is actually like during the recruitment process, right? You're building trust the moment you extend an offer. Are they trusting that you are giving them a fair offer, right? The compensation, the title, the level that you decided on, all of those things is your very first experience with trust. And trust is built on those experiences. So when it comes to your offer, that's that first building of trust, and then it just continues on. And when you have a positive experience giving feedback, they'll typically give you feedback and more over time, right? And it's really grounded in the humanness of the conversation, the empathy in your response. So, if I think it's also really important to not show sometimes, like if you're shocked by an answer, you're kind of laying your cards out there, but really making sure that you are empathetic, but also not overly, there's a word I'm looking for. It's like rattled, I guess, right? Because if you show that you're rattled by feedback someone is giving you, it makes them feel like maybe they can't trust you. So making sure that, the way that you approach those conversations is authentic, but also, kind of
like non-judgmental.
yes. Yeah. And then it's important to say thank you too. Like what I will do at the end of all of these check-ins here at Open Comp is I will take those and I will bubble them into themes and share it with, Tang, our CEO. And I will say, here are the things that I'm hearing that we're doing really well and people like about working here. And here are some areas of opportunity, right? We've doubled in headcount in the first 5 months of this year. You don't double in headcount in 5 months without breaking things, right? I know that there are things that are going to come out that we're going to work on. But taking those themes, distilling it down to the leadership team. So after I talk to Tang about it, I will go to our executive team. I will share those themes, and then I will action plan with them and deliver it back to the employees at a future all hands as an example. So that employees know, one, I'm giving that feedback to me was valuable. And I heard them, and here's what I've heard, and I'm doing something about it. And again, if it's something like I want offsites 4 times a year, and maybe we can't financially afford that, I will explain the why and the justification as to why we didn't action on some things, right? And so I think, part of that conversation will also be with thank you for doing that. Thank you, everyone who came to me and had real honest conversations. And because you had honest conversations with me, here's the action we're taking, right? And I think that it's just a really important thing that we thank the team.
Yeah, saying thank you is so important.
Yeah.
I also really liked what you said around, try not to take this feedback personally, because on any journey, and especially when you're moving quickly, things are going to break. And especially when you're laser focused on, getting something in particular done, it's, not everything can be a priority. So the feedback is simply a reminder that, hey, there's other things that maybe need attention and perhaps need to be reprioritized. And so it's an important reminder and way to look back. And like you said, like that thank you to the employees really goes a long way in knowing that what they have to say is appreciated, even if it cannot be actioned upon immediately.
Yeah. And I think that's also really important to say too, is you shouldn't action on 15 things, right? I think you need to have the most impact. It's important for you to action on maybe like 2 or 3 pieces of feedback so that you can do those things really well. So I would also caution folks of, if you get 15 different themes, one, I would say you're probably not really grouping your themes and really being concise about it. But I would really caution, even if I have 5 themes, when I go to the executive team, I probably won't say for the size and all the things that we need to get done that we should action on all 5. I'll probably prioritize and say, let's focus and be more focused in our approach and only, look at 2 or 3. So just want to mention that as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
When you're too spread out, you don't really do anything well. But if we're going to pick the most important, or what we deem to be the most important, in alignment with our objectives at that point in time, we have a much better chance of achieving those goals and showing the employees that, hey, we listened, we made some movements, what do you think now, right? And again, like that goes back to what you were saying about building trust. Employees can see the difference, can see the efforts being made, and again, know that they're being heard and actively listened to because there's momentum behind that feedback.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier regarding that all hands meeting, and the all hands essentially being a great way that companies come together as a holistic unit, a really important piece of how you build your company culture. And so I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about what influence does the HR team have on the company culture overall?
I would say it's a huge influence that the HR team has, but I will also say that I hate when HR is looked at as responsible for culture. We all are responsible for culture. How we show up is us contributing to the culture. But the way that we contribute is all over the place, right? It's the hiring. Did the HR and recruiting teams really hire the best talent? Did we hire the right skill sets? Because if you bring people on board and you picked the wrong skill set and they are struggling in their role, what does that do to the team that has to now support this person who is wrong for the job, right? So hiring, super important to how we contribute to the company. The other thing is leaders, right? I mentioned HR product managers and how sometimes conversations that you have with your managers could be a result of an HR product. Did we develop their skill set? Pardon me, their leadership skill set enough? Did we make sure that they understand how to set priorities, how to give feedback, how to have a one-on-one, right? So really refining the leadership skills are an important thing that HR plays when they're developing their people leaders. It's also growing and developing your talent, right? So how are we providing career opportunities for folks? So, one of the great things that we've done at OpenComp, and Leanne, that you were part of this, we had someone over in professional services who was really playing a really great part in customer success. And we gave that experience to say, go over to customer success and go see what that feels like, and giving stretch opportunities, right, to the team. And then also it comes down to your rewards program. How are you or not necessarily influencing, but how are you rewarding and recognizing your people? I think it's hugely important and something that is really important in company culture. And this is, how are you compensating? Are you compensating for performance? How do you compensate when you hire folks too, right? It's also things like promotion. Do you promote only people who are, the quote, brilliant, and I'll curse, brilliant assholes, right? Or do you promote people who, one, they get their work done, but they show up every day positively influencing and the culture with, a can-do approach and collaboration, et cetera. So I think that those are really big parts on how we impact and influence, and all of those things, right, shape the culture. So it's not just one pillar, it's a lot of the function that really shapes the culture.
And I think also celebrating the wins, right, is an important call out. So both the wins of an individual as well as the wins of the company as a whole, because it's important that if the company is successful, that the employees feel that, that they have ownership over that success, and they feel empowered and motivated and excited because that is their success as well.
Right. And I think, that's super important in a people first culture. Aligning again, the company and the people's success together. We hit this milestone and you celebrate, and an all hands, you hold a special event for it. And here are all the team members, again, thanking them. Here's how your direct influence and work helped us achieve this. I think it's hugely important.
Absolutely. Now, you also touched on the compensation philosophy. So, similar to asking about feedback, it's not simply the fact that you do it, right, or the fact that you have a compensation philosophy, but it's about how you utilize this philosophy to ensure that it's competitive, that it's consistent, and that it's, fair, of course. So you're making the proper compensation decisions to grow your company. And it's going to address questions like, what data are you using to make these decisions? What do you consider competitive in the market? And which guiding principles do you actually leverage in your decision making?
Well, I think what's also important, and I'll talk about that right now, is how are you sharing this with the team? Right. So during performance reviews, your merit cycle, however it is that you decide to pay your folks, if you do it at their 1-year anniversary, but do you share your compensation philosophy? I think it's a great best practice to go do, right? So even starting with, how do you benchmark roles? Well, we benchmark against companies that look similar to us, right? What does that mean? Do you look at stage, right? So Series A, do you look at size? Do you look at industry? All of those things are really important, and important to communicate back to the team. Again, earning their trust. I understand how I was paid, and I trust that. I trust that my compensation is right. Why? Because I was told, right? Because of the way that we share those things. So I think, the benchmarking data is really important. Having ranges in place is hugely important, because especially when you get to paying for performance. How do you pay your people, your top performers? Do you pay them at the Q1 to midpoint? I would say you probably shouldn't, right? If these are people that are critical to your success and the performance of the company, why would you pay them in the lower end of the range, right? So maybe you have different tiers within your ranges that say, based on performance, we pay people here. And it's also important to make sure that you're sticking to those ranges. I've had examples where maybe you bring in someone and you bring them in above the pay range because they had another market competitive offer. And that person comes on board and 8 months later, you're going, this is a strong performer. I want to promote them. And you look at the next level band and you realize they're even out of that pay range, right? So then you're going, well, crap, now what can I give this person for a promotion that's going to feel meaningful to them? A 2% increase for a promotion does not feel meaningful. That doesn't feel rewarding. It doesn't feel like I'm recognized by the company. So I think it's really important that when you're selecting your compensation philosophy, that you are really being hygienic, I guess, and diligent in keeping and sticking to those ranges as much as possible. Because you will have a later down the road consequence that you may have to deal with in situations where you pay outside range. And it's the same when you pay low. You bring someone in at, maybe they're under Q1, maybe at the very minimum, and you decide 8 months later, you want to go promote them. And you're looking and you're like, wow, it's $40,000 to get them to the very minimum of the next range. And now I can't afford that because that eats up my entire team budget, not just, right. So I can't afford this. And now what are you doing? Now you're saying, okay, well, instead I'm going to give them what I can't afford. Maybe it's $10,000, and maybe that $10,000 only gets them from the min of their current range to the Q1, and they're still so far off from that new level range that you're creating distrust with your team, right? Then they go to their friends and they say, just got promoted, here was my cash increase. And their friend says, well, when I had that role, I was making X. And they're going, what? Well, I thought I was fairly compensated, right? So again, making sure that you are very diligent in sticking to your compensation philosophy, I think is very important in that trust building with employee.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That consistency is important for today, from a trust building and a pay equity perspective, and also for tomorrow, again, because compensation is a journey. Just like the employment relationship is a journey, and compensation requires planning. And you touched on something really important, which is the layering of competency and the continued growth of competency, as well as performance, and how those two pieces, in a way, like lie on top of a pay range, right? If you just have this visual of your pay range and you put competency and performance on top of it, it helps answer the question as to why am I paying an employee what I'm paying? And that visual should make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, if you can't explain it, then maybe something needs to be done about that employee's pay. But that also helps empower this productive conversation between hiring managers, people managers, HR, and team members about what each employee is paid and why. So when an employee asks, why am I paid what I am paid, how do you address their perceptions?
This is something that I see often with software engineers. So in software engineers, you're often on a similar team and you're working on a project together. And I tend to see some more junior folks in their career who have maybe only been doing it a couple of times think, well, I'm delivering the same exact value as a staff software engineer who's got 15 years experience. And I'm just making this specific example up, but you'll get folks like that who go, well, I know that they are making 40% more than me, 30% more than me. And so there's often this thought that I am not being paid fairly. And what you have to then do is walk them back and explain, well, different levels have different bands, right? And when you are newly promoted, as an example, you don't promote someone to the midpoint or the Q3 or the maximum of the range, right? You don't want to max out someone's pay so quickly that they now have no room, right? Back to the other example I gave where they were paid outside the range. And so when you do go to promote them, there's no growth, right? And so I think again, educating. Well, here's the competencies that they have, having a career leveling framework in place that you can then say, okay, I understand why, you're on the same project as, let's just again say, the staff software engineer. You feel you're contributing the same. Well, let's look at the leveling structure together. Where are the competencies that maybe, even though you're working on the same project, you're not delivering as much value yet, and how do we get you to that next level, right? So that you're having an educated conversation about leveling and how leveling ties into pay ranges, right? It's not, pay ranges aren't just, you don't, arbitrarily come up with these. They are based on a leveling framework. And so I think it's just really important that you are explaining that and educating the team along the way.
Absolutely. And I think something you and I have talked about is how do we empower managers to have these sorts of conversations with their team members? So how do we provide that level of education? And I think that's what our community can expect to see, very soon coming down the pipe, in our knowledge base. But I've had many of these conversations with employees myself, and honestly, I find that just answering employee questions can sometimes be enough. So going back to that open door policy and being transparent with your team members, making sure that they know and they feel like they can trust you enough to have conversations with you because you are willing to give them authentic answers. Yeah. Even when I've shared responses that employees probably don't want to hear, or maybe that's not what they, not the answer that they want, they simply value the fact that we're having that conversation because so many employers actually don't do this. And it was interesting because a couple weeks ago, I was on a flight home. I was actually writing up a little piece on compensation on my laptop, and the passenger sitting next to me tapped me on the shoulder and, thinking I needed to get up. I closed my laptop. I start getting out of my seat. But he's like, no, I want to talk to you. And he asked me what I did for work, and then we proceeded to talk for the remainder of the flight about his experience of being both a recent job candidate as well as an employee and the lack of compensation transparency that he experienced. And he specifically asked questions around, as an employee, what can he do to better prepare himself, to better advocate for himself, and to simply be more empowered in these conversations with employers. And my piece of advice, that I gave to him was just ask the questions, right? Go to HR, ask them what you want to know. Understand, where is the data coming from? What is your compensation philosophy? What do you value in the organization? What is your promotion strategy? How are you leveling me? How do you view my competency within this organization? Yeah. And then make sure that you feel confident in how they're answering those questions. And I think this just goes back to that trust building component that we've been anchoring on.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
So Ashley, let's sum this up a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about your gold nuggets and what our community members should take away from this discussion.
Yeah, I would say number one, go talk to your people. You want to build a people first culture, go talk to the people that are making that culture, that are showing up. They are here every day. They see things, they see how leadership shows up. There's valuable feedback. So go figure out how to establish that feedback loop with them. I would also say aligning, the company success with employee success, making sure that they understand how does my performance impact our ability to win when in the market, right? And then last thing is, make sure that you have a compensation philosophy. We talk about that trust building being right from the beginning, the moment they received their offer. And so if you don't have that compensation philosophy in place, and you were just making offers based on a competing offer that they have, or someone that you knew that once had this role and what they were making, right? You're establishing a bad relationship of trust the moment that they've joined your organization. And that's really hard to fix, as I've mentioned, down the road.
This is completely spot on. Ashley, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you being here with us.
Great. Thank you so much, Leanne. It was a lot of fun.
We'll see y'all next time. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.